From reassuring fans with a fresh story and new pairings, to people calling for the OG franchise to just end now, here's why The Walking Dead. Dead City is single-handedly saving the Walking Dead franchise, which is what it desperately needs. Because when there's other zombie dramas like The Last of Us that are doing so much better, no one's going to be interested in watching the same old characters going on the same adventure, only to die and respawn for the billionth time, are they? And you all know this. What once was AMC's biggest show is nowhere near its early glory days right now. 12 years later and 11 long seasons later, it's starting to taste pretty stale. But AMC still isn't throwing it out. In fact, it's churning spin-off after spin-off, trying to extend the universe for as long as possible and make it look new. But that's hardly what's happened here. Most of these spin-offs have fared really poorly, with negative reviews from fans and critics both, who hate them. And I'll tell you why in just a bit. But before that, let's take a look at the only spin-off that hasn't failed, and is actually pretty unique, fresh, and a sight for sore eyes. The newly released Dead City, which has managed to convince fans to stay on board for a little longer. Because hey, this ship isn't sinking. The series is set sometime after the finale of the original series, and it sees Maggie, our newly integrated leader of Hilltop, and her worst enemy, Negan, team up for one shared, dangerous goal: to break into virus-infused Manhattan, New York. Now, while they do share the same goal here, their reasons are, of course, vastly different. Maggie here is on the lookout for her son, Herschel, who was kidnapped from their home at Hilltop. And as for Negan, well, bad boy as he is, he's just got some bad blood with that same gang that kidnapped Herschel. And being in a very new environment for the first time since the virus hit, he and Maggie think that the best course of action here is to put their hard feelings aside and look for their enemy together. Because you know what they say, your enemy's enemy is your best friend, even if in this case, he happens to be your worst enemy too. And honestly, if you ask me, Maggie and Negan's dynamic is one of the best things about the series. You see, we all know that any spin-off is as good as the characters that it chooses to focus on. And Dead City makes a very compelling proposal here. Maggie's one of the longest surviving members of the first group. She's been with us since Season 2 of The Walking Dead, and fans are really attached to her at this point. What's more, The Walking Dead never really gave us a lot of insight into Maggie, and she also faded into the background after Glenn died. And that was disappointing as hell because everyone knows that she had a lot of potential. But now, by placing her at the center of everything, Dead City is here to change that. But still, Maggie alone isn't enough to spice things up, is she? So, Dead City also draws its viewership by using a certain leather-clad anti-hero. Because there's nothing people love more than a bad guy who turns good. Or almost good. Whatever works, really. And placing him next to Maggie, of all people, well, that's just the cherry on top. Because there's just so much to unpack between these two. Hatred, regret, anger, murder. These two probably have the most complex relationship in the whole franchise, and Dead City shows us what lies underneath it all. So, it definitely roped me in. But if the characters aren't enough for you, there's also the setting, which is extremely different from what we're used to seeing in The Walking Dead. We all know that the original show has mostly stuck to showing either the woods or just old suburban settlements. But as the name of the spin-off suggests, Dead City takes place in a very different world. And it's not just different that makes it exciting. It's literally New York City different. A city of that size and glamour, a city that's literally crawling with walkers, but yet it still has survivors brave enough to form whole-ass gangs. Now, that's something everyone really wants to see. Whatever happened to the Statue of Liberty or Times Square, right? What's more, Dead City also takes everyone a step forward from The Walking Dead's plain old zombies, even amping them up and having newer, more dangerous variants. Because everyone's gotta be 10x cooler in NYC. And by doing all this, the series has surpassed all expectations. And sure, it's not like the expectations were super high to begin with, considering the franchise's track record and all. Most fans were tired by then, and they really couldn't find the enthusiasm for yet another installment. Comments under the YouTube post begged the AMC to let the dead rest and try something new for once. This one user even wrote how the public was just burned out on zombie shows by this point and really didn't want more. So AMC needed to stop milking that old cow. Another fan agreed with this sentiment, writing that the Walking Dead franchise had great potential in the first few seasons, and had it ended then, it would have been remembered among great shows. But now, it's all gone to crap. And honestly, can you blame him? Even if you remove the original series from the picture, which arguably had one of the most boring final seasons in the history of television, there's still the matter of those other dozen spin-offs that have been just as bad, if not worse. First, AMC released Fear the Walking Dead, which, just like its parent show, got off to a very great start. But then, the original showrunner left, and the series fell apart in an instant. The writing had never been worse, and what the hell were those no-sense plot lines? It got progressively worse with every season. And at this point, you can't even tolerate one episode of that show. Yep, it's really that bad. But what did AMC do? It brought in another spin-off, of course, called World Beyond, which wasn't any better. And that showed in the numbers because none of these shows retained any viewership numbers, and critics bashed them from every corner. And of course, the ratings for the OG show had also dramatically dropped for its later seasons. For good reason, too. Because if you keep changing the characters and stories so much, as this series has, people will hate you. And don't get me wrong, this same unpredictability in the series once used to drive people mad, in the best way possible. You never knew who was going to make it here, and this was something that worked for many seasons. So people loved tuning in year after year to see Rick Grimes and the gang taking on new adventures and trying to make a life out of what the world had now become. But then, one fine day, the show just started to go downhill. Really, really fast. And it definitely lost all its power when Negan entered the scene, which isn't to say that the character isn't good or anything. After all, Negan's the same dude who's making Dead City so interesting, isn't he? He wasn't the problem here. It's just that character development for everyone sort of stopped when his character was introduced, and the writing took a turn for the worst. And soon, no one cared about who lived or died in this zombie-verse. Because that emotional attachment that they once had with those characters had just vanished into thin air. Naturally, it wasn't a surprise to see so many fans enjoying the show's cancellation news, saying that was about damn time now. Sure, some did say that it was a very bittersweet moment for them, but don't make the mistake of confusing that for them being sad or anything. It was only because they wished the series had ended on a better note many, many years ago. Plus, a lot of these fans had this deep-seated resentment for the creators as well, and they hated the fact that they'd wasted so much of their time and invested so much into watching a show that amounted to nothing in the end. So, of course, they weren't going to go all gaga when they found out that the universe was still on, with a third show added to the spin-off list, right? But thankfully, to everyone's surprise, Dead City has proven everyone wrong. Like, you can really see the effort pouring in from all sides here, in every episode. After all, there's a reason that every episode so far has been getting rave reviews from both fans and critics. And don't get me wrong, these fans are still tired of this franchise, and still want it to end. But they also see the potential here. The potential of Dead City to revamp the franchise and give it the proper ending that it's deserved. And also give them something good out of their decade-long investment. And for their sake, I really hope it does. So, from people calling for the OG franchise to end, to the spin-off giving fans a much-needed change of scenery, this was how Dead City has saved the Walking Dead franchise.